Okay, so I have shared my slides. Are my slides visible to all of you?
Yeah, we
Can you
can
see?
see them.
Okay, okay. So yeah, first of all, thank you for understanding everyone. Last class, it was really a health emergency and I couldn't, at a very short notice, I had to cancel the class. So I know I told you that I would record a video on this particular topic, but I felt like, recording a video and then uploading it in the canvas, most of us, we don't like to go through the recorded video, mostly when it is, being recorded by your instructor. And while discussing on a topic which is so comprehensive, I also afraid that, the video may get longer and that would have kind of restricted your interest. So I just thought that okay, we actually have a very good class time, right, which is 2 to 3:20, and we almost get 1 hour and 20 minutes, right? So let's discuss it, right? Let's discuss the topic. We still have some time at our hands, and as I said earlier, that we will be discussing about the group project in the second half of today's class. Okay, so let's start with this discussion about what is the theoretical perspective related to the use of media and technology, right? So just a minute. Okay. So I don't know how many of you have gone through the reading material, which was uploaded for the last 2 weeks discussion on this topic. The one chapter that we have, which is very much related to the media and technology. So I decided to be very specific on, keep our discussion on the very theoretical perspectives, right? What are the different theories that we can find beyond the use of media and technology? And as you so as you go through, or say, when if you have or some of you have gone through that material, you might have seen that towards the end of that chapter of media and technology, they have discussed this different theoretical perspective about the functionalism and, uh, conflict, theory and the symbolic interactionism, and also about the feminist perspective. So I would like to, throw some light on these perspectives and how we can understand, right, this media and technology from these different perspectives. So when we say about functional perspective, what does it mean actually? We are actually talking about the very smooth functioning of media. And I remember that we have almost like, in all those chapters that I had uploaded in relation to all those topics that we discussed, all the chapters actually talked about these, sociological theories, which is so much related to our use of media. And we have tried to relate the use of those theories, right? And with our use of the media. Similarly, right, those use of theories that we had already discussed were very much specific to the media representation. But here it's very much, our discussion is based on, utility of media and how this media utility can be reflected, in individuals' perspective. So when uh, the very first question that comes to our mind about the use of media is why are we using this media? What is the use of this media and technology, right? How are they contributing to us? That is the first very, simple and very straight line question that directly comes to us. And even without answering that question, we can kind of, even explain that, okay, the very, answer for these may be because of some of the benefits that we get from the media. right? And that's the simple answer of the question that we ask to ourselves. But there are some very specific categories that we need to care about when we are talking about the utilities of media. And these media utilities are being categorized into different perspectives. Like if you look into our society, how your use of media can be cannot be similar to others' use of media. Or maybe, if you just try to look upon the individual use and the group's use, right? So, for what purpose an individual is using media may be very different from why a group of people is using a media, right? So, even though it seems like the answer is very simple because I'm getting all those benefit from the use of media, but it has very specific categories of those utilities. And the chapter has talked about, very briefly about those categories, like, the media has this commercial utility, and then the entertainment, utility, social norms, how media is also, trying to, uh, we are using media and how in return media uh, is socializing us, right? And it's how it is helping us, or maybe it's kind of influencing us to uh, agree to how people in the society, other people in the society act, talk, right? So it also helps to set our social norms. So if you look at, age wise, if you look at, when I say age wise, I'm kind of trying to going back to different, going to and fro to different periods of time. So if you look at or compare different forms of media and its utilities, you will understand that how, when during, say, from the time of the World War to the pre-digital age, television was one of the, main uh, contributor of information in the society. And when we say that, it's not only about information. Through television, it came out as one of the main platform for different corporations, the corporate houses, to preach their ideas through different advertisements, right? So that is where the commercial, utilities of the media lie. Just a minute, I'm just looking at my email if there is some, I've got some emails about. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so these are the different utilities of media from the functional perspective. If you look at media, they have this commercial utilities, how through television different advertisements are being preached, and how through those advertisements, it influences people's behavior. And not only television. Now, if you come to the digital age, and even, during the time when the television was at the very, at the very front, in kind of influencing people's behavior, you would have also found that, okay, how even in competition with television, there were some other, traditional media like theater, or, some other traditional communications like puppetries, which are still being used. But then, yes, these were the different forms of media which were circulating their own ideas through different advertisements, right? And if you also look at now, when in the digital age, if you look at how these media are being used, you'll find that these advertisements are used in the outdoor platforms, not trying to only, attract the view of the audiences within a media frame. I mean, within a media object, but then coming out of that, for example, say, big corporate houses like Coca-Cola, or maybe, all those big giant companies, what they do is they set, or they would organize different outlets, media outlets in public places, in order to circulate their own idea about a product. So that can also be, seen as how all those media, they comprise of commercial objective in it, right? Second, if you look at, what are the other objectives apart from the profit making, intention of these companies, you'd find that the media has always been used as an entertainment agency, right? And we cannot deny that fact. And as we know that how media, it has different other objectives. It's not only about entertaining, but it's also about informing, also about educating. But all these can also be done through entertainment, right? So watching movies, and even in today's age, with all these digital platforms and emergence of different, online spaces, you'll find that how different nature of entertainment has arrived. I mean, it has emerged out that entertainment can also be, seen uh, in terms of engagement, not only in terms of watching, viewing, but also in terms of engagement, right? Through gaming or maybe through chatting. So these were different entertainment functions, and even if you utilize or compare the utilities of media from earlier to the present day context, you'll find that how these different, entertainments are being designed in today's age and how different they are. So another, functional objective about the media is about its, how media is being used to set a social norms. You'll find that how people would, depend on media, how the things are being portrayed and represented in the media, and how as a result all those media influences the people's behavior, and all those things we have been discussing, in our courses, through all those documentaries, what were all, I mean, what actually, all these documentaries were telling you, all these documentaries were telling about the mode of representation and how different representations were done by different forms of media, and different kinds of representation even, right? And all those representations, they have only one objective about setting a social norm. So when we say social norm, you don't have to go back to understand the cultural, the cultural makeup of a society. You don't always have to do that. When I'm telling about social norms, it's about coming up with a new rule in a society, right? Or say coming up with a new product in a society, and then influencing the people, the member of the society, that this product is the most, useful one than the others, right? So it serves us, right? The media, it serves us to socialize us, right? It helps us to pass along those beliefs and attitudes from one generation to other, right? So what, or how, in what different ways these media are actually influencing us? That is something that, a lot of research has been conducted on, and they found that, as a result, people, or say the consumer of the media, they not only view the media, setting the rule, but they also try to, act on that. That means committing that value, committing or trying to, kind of maintain that order being set by the media, right? And that's where the very functioning role of media lies. So another very important aspect of this functional perspective is about the life-changing role of media, where we all know that, media has both the good and bad perspective, or say, you know the perspective about good and bad of media, it differs from individual to individual, right? And then it can also have differential impact on, based on individual, and sometimes these are also based on different characteristics. Like, in if I have to give an example, then I will, kind of limit it on the basis of representation of individual, you know across gender lines, racial lines. So there are good and bad impact of media in our lives based on different characteristics. That's what, the functional perspective of media, it is talking about. And it also talks about that a concept of, narcotic dysfunction. So with all these, the emergence of immersive media, I'm not talking about only the digital platforms. Now I'm getting into this immersive media. When I'm telling immersive, that means you have to bring in all those AIs and, all those VI or AI UX design setting, the advanced level of, using online spaces for game and all these things. So what happens with all those advanced forms of media? They change our lives in such a way that we become so much dependable on media, and then we forget about the functioning part of the media, right? Media, in a way, so far now we have been discussing that what is being represented in media, so we kind of act accordingly, right? But this very concept about narcotic dysfunction is kind of, dysfunctioning your ability to act. Okay. It's sometimes you are more dependent on media. You are only doing, awareness activities, and is not doing any kind of activity which is transferred into action. Okay, so you, for example, say, uh, we don't know why are we scrolling on social media. We don't have any objective most of the time these days. We just spent our time on doom scrolling, and then suddenly with one or two contents, you can kind of, identify why are you looking at that particular content. But most of the time, if you look at and if you try to understand that, you'll find that we don't have any objectives. We just only would scroll down these online contents and kind of, satisfied with the awareness level of those contents, and you would not like to act upon that. So this term about narcotic dysfunction is kind of, detaching yourself from the real world and only living in the world of imagination, or maybe, only for your own benefit to get aware of that and not acting on that. So when you are, creating awareness for yourself, even that can be action. I mean, you can argue even that, but not an action for the society. Whereas the functional perspective of the media talks about the smooth functioning of the society, right? It talks about that how with the use of media you can change the society. You can bring some good contribution to the society. Whereas with the rise of all these online technologies and all these things, you will see that how, these are time consuming, you know time consuming devices most of the time if you don't have any objective set, right? So yeah, so this is all about the functional perspective of media I would like to discuss, I wanted to discuss about. But where is the gender, race, class, or all the other identity markers when we are discussing about use of media and technology? So from the functional perspective, you will have to look at, from the lens of race and gender, how media is being used for setting some norms about gender, some norms about race, some norms about, power in the society, right? So I see the role of functional perspective from the lens of race, racism, and power in the setting of social norms, not only social norms, but then all these different categories that we have discussed. If you give some time to yourself and think about all these categories and where you can apply, right, appropriately the use of media and technology in the context of, identity markers, then you'd find that even with the commercial function, you'll find that some advertisements are very much, the objective of one advertisement can be targeted to one particular section of the society, right? So the commercial function, or say, the composition of a society, they represent the composition of a society through the advertisement. For example, say in some advertisement, you may get this, feeling that this advertisement is not for me. This is for the dominant section of the society. So even with the commercial utility of the media in the context of its, functionalism, if you look at from the gender role, from the power or perspective, or from the racial lines, you'll find that, okay, all these categories make sense about the functional role of media, even, across this gender and race and the power roles. I don't know how clear am I in explaining about the functional perspective. If you have any question, please, you are allowed to ask that. Do you have any question on the functional perspective of use of media and technology? If no, we can just continue the slides. Okay. So coming to the conflict perspective, right? So most of the representations, media representations, through the documentaries, all those documentaries that we watched. So all those documentaries, they have this dynamic of power, representation of power dynamics, right? So there can be someone who is at the upper level, you know, kind of and a section who is subordinating to the domain, to the dominant section. So the conflict perspective, it emerges out of that setting of, the upper and the lower section of the society. So if you look into, particularly in relation to the use of media and technology, then you would find that there is existence of this conflict in the creation of inequalities by media. So when you just, simply look at the hierarchical structure of the society, especially the US society, in itself it has, or in any society, not only in the US, but if you just look at any society, there are some hierarchies, so which in itself represents some conflict, right? But when we are talking about, the role of media and technology and how is that contributing to the inequality, you would find that, in today's society with all these online platforms and the digitalization process going on, people are suffering, right? One section of people are suffering for not able to get access to different media technologies. So there is this concept about digital divide. I'm very much sure that you all are aware of that, and how this digital divide, it impacts, right, different sections of society, and it creates a tug of war between two different sections. So uneven access to technology, right, and that issue of accessibility, it can be based on different characteristics, as I said. So as we are into this course of gender race, I'm just taking this example of how, even technology in today's society can be accessed more if you are from a dominant group of a society, and can be accessed less if you are not from a dominant section of the society. So there are these, class-based access issues in the society, right? You'll find that still today there are a lot of examples, and all these examples they got exposed during the COVID-19 when digital education, people were advocating for digital education, distance learning models, and how different research agencies they came up with all these findings that how in a society there is still a large chunk of people who are marginalized and alienated from all those technological knowledge. And that's why they can't access that, right? So you need to look into, this conflict perspective uh, based on what different characteristics that, people can access and cannot access media and use media, right? So technology use, you will find that sometime uh, I may not have a computer, I may not have a laptop, but I may be using my smartphone for the internet access. Okay, so I have the internet access, but I don't have the advanced technology. I only have my access is only limited to the smartphone because I can't afford laptop. Okay, so in that case, where is this conflict perspective coming from? The conflict, you can look at, how even with owning a smartphone and getting access to the internet facility, I cannot work evenly, or say cannot work conveniently in comparison to people who have access to advanced technologies like laptop. So there are some, dedicated action or features of each of these technologies, right? And that's where this question about for what purpose you are using technology. Are you only using for the entertainment, or is there more than entertainment? So there are some technology when you own that has an attached value to it, which is more about entertainment than empowerment, which is more about information than empowerment, right? So for example, say, if I have to use my, or say if I have to write a cover letter for a job application, I know that I have my smartphone and I can do that in my smartphone, but that can't be so convenient, in comparison to someone who is having a big desktop and a big screen laptop at home and kind of, using it for writing a cover letter. So empowerment is one of the issue with the use of technology. And are we empowering all the communities with the use of technology and media equally or not is the main question, right? And with this differential access to media, you'll find that there is also a knowledge gap, right? You'll find that there are some people who haven't got access to the technological knowledge even, though the government in to some extent plays a great role in influencing, or say in catering to that technological knowledge for the marginalized people through government educational setting. But even then you'll find that it's also very much based on the community. And even if you say, for example, in your school hour, if you have got the facility being provided by the government to your school to use internet and the technology, even that can't, help you if you don't have it at your home. Okay. So you will, in one hand, you will have to kind of, cope up with the knowledge gap, and which you can obviously do with all those provisions being given by the government, right? But you can't kind of, practice it. So which brings us to this very question about e-readiness. So this e-readiness is something that even if the government is trying to meet up this demand of technological knowledge equally among all the sections of the society, you will find that the marginalized section, or say even among members from among the community who do not have any knowledge gap, they are not knowledgeable enough to sort out the information correctly. So there are so much of information overload, right? And as I said, this differential access to media can also be seen through the access of internet. In some areas you'll have the high speed internet access. In other cases, you'll find the low speed internet. So it give rise to different types of communities. You will see that uh, communities from rural areas, they may not purchase a broadband connection, okay, but member from community of urban areas, they have broadband connection, personal computer settings at their homes. So it also gives rise to different types of communities. Okay. And if you look at from different characteristics of identity, you will find that, and a lot of research, one study from Pew Research, they found that how most of the Latin Americans and most of the yeah Latin Americans and the people of color, they have you know limited access of internet than the people of dominant section in the society. So this is how the conflict perspective can be seen through the use of media and technology. Another point is about the reliance or imbalance, which is more about the relationship being created by the media. As now that there are so many researches being done which say that, okay, with the use of media and technology, people have started to think like you have grown a great level of attachment with your friends, which you couldn't have done without texting. So, this very dependence on the media, it also creates an imbalance, which sometimes, you cannot cope up with the daily course or the daily objective of your life, as because you are so much dependent on the media. So as a result, all these, use of media and technology affecting the relationship, it gives us this impression about guilt. It sometimes also talk about the pressure that you're putting upon your friends. Okay. uh, as you are more dependent on media, so you expect that your friend would reply to your message right now, but that's not happening. Okay. So that is also somehow affecting your satisfaction level. Okay. So these are some of the conflict perspective that you have with this context of media use and technological use of of media. There is another major point about this conflict perspective, which is very much depend on who is controlling the media. And when I say who is controlling the media, I'm not only talking about who is owning the media company. I'm not only talking about that. I'm also talking about the gatekeeping model, right? When inside a media structure, you see that the editor is responsible to gatekeep a content, that means he has the control of the content. He has the control over the media, or he has, at least to some extent, a control over a good amount of people, right? What kind of contents they need to consume and not, kind of don't have to consume, right? So even with the gatekeeping model, you can find that how media controlling is being done, right? Apart from this, control over the content, there is also control over the data and control over the information. So when we say control over the data, all of you are aware about about the Cambridge Analytica issue, right, which was kind of so much controversial about selling, people's general information, right? So the privacy is being breached by selling those personal information by Facebook to another company. So you lose your control over data, you lose your control over the information, right? Because different media agencies, news agencies, they would kind of, curate a series of information for you, and you believe that this is the only important information that I have to consume. So this is talking about this vast conflict of power, the dynamic power dynamic that is taking place here, that if you are in the government, that means you may not be tracked more often, or for example, say if you are from a dominant section of society, you may not be tracked that often than tracking someone who belongs to uh, the minority in the society, right? So this talks about media control, and that's where the conflict perspective lie, right? And you can also see that how there is differential control over data. How there can be a differential control over data? For example, say there can be different agencies who can control your data. On one hand, company can control your data, social media companies, right? On the other hand, government can control your data, and you can also see how even for the information of the children in the US, schools, if you look at the information being, kind of stored of the children in the schools. So according to an online privacy act, Children Protection Act, you'll find that the information about the children who are below the age of 13 can only be handled by their parents. So your own information can be controlled by companies, by government, and can also be controlled by your own people, right? So there are this differential control over data, and that's where the conflict perspective lie. How many of you know about net neutrality? What is this concept? Can anyone please, explain about that to me? If you have gone through that earlier, or if you have got that earlier anywhere. Yes, Shiloh, please go ahead.
I think, if I'm correct, it was something to do with having ownership over the internet.
Uh-huh. Yes, yes, you're right. I mean, yeah, it's about accessibility, and to be more specific, equal accessibility or equal use of internet, right? So it's kind of a very controversial, it has been a controversial topic, and some people don't believe on it, but it's something like, people who have actually kind of propounded this idea about net neutrality. Their objective is that even the internet service that we are using must also be seen in the similar line of the other services that we are using, like the electricity service, like the water service. Okay. So that's where, this concept of net neutrality comes in. They want to make make the internet accessible equally to all sections of the society. This is the basic concept about net neutrality. Now, when you look at this both conflict and functional perspective of this concept of net neutrality, you will find that how these big corporates, right? What they do, for example, say the big corporates like Facebook, right? Or say or let's not consider the social media companies at this point. Let's go to some product companies like the Amazon. Okay, so they would kind of sponsor more. They would like to invest more into the social media companies for their own benefit, right? And in that case, if they decide to invest more into Facebook, into advertisement policies of the Facebook, Facebook would definitely do that. They would definitely welcome that. But as a result, there would be, you know, the effect would be more into the small companies. As because the Amazon would like to reach to all people and say that, see, these are our products we are selling, and you don't have to go out and purchase it. We are more reliable. And they would choose a social media company like Facebook as a partner to circulate their idea about how they are more convenient and qualitative than other products which are being sold by some smaller companies, in a store, right? So there lies this very conflict perspective, between the big corporates and the small companies. This is from the conflict perspective when you look at the net neutrality, because the internet is being controlled by some big corporates through their investment in different policies of the social media companies, right? So the social media company is kind of opening up their internet access not to the people who loves to shop in store. Okay, they would open up their access of all those online products being circulated by the Amazon and all these companies, product companies, to the people who are more internet crazy, who are more online. Okay, so this is conflict perspective about net neutrality. Now when you come to the functional perspective about net neutrality, you will see that how so we talk about this functionalism, right, which talks about the smooth functioning of the society. And this very smooth functioning of the society, it is based on what? It is based on all those social orders being set, right? So the companies, the very basic order of a company is to earn profit, and the company has to earn that. And the very functional perspective about that is, if only a company earns a profit, they can help, extend their service to the underserved areas for the marginalized population. So that's where the functional perspective about the net neutrality lies, right? So the big companies, they would obviously kind of, they would use the internet in order to earn profit, and they would also take care that from that profit they can also invest for section of the underserved areas or the marginalized people. Now, the chapter talks about feminist perspective, and I don't think that I have to discuss this in detail. You all know about that, how this perspective is more about creating an alternate platform, I would say. Okay, let me show you some facts here. Okay, as you can see, right, how the representation gender wise is being done in the big technologies. So when we are talking about media use and technology, you need to look into how this technological representation across gender lines are pictured in our society. And as you can see that with the representation of women in the big technological companies like Amazon, you will not find, group of, you know, this population in the technical lines. So there is this, what we call it as gender gap in tech related field. So it's very obvious when you look at all this data, all these technological companies, they have very few percentages of women representing in the technical jobs. There are some people in leadership field, but not in the technical jobs. So this is where the gender gap in the technical field lie. And this is where the feminist perspective they focus more on, and they would very much like to reflect onto this, making balance about representation of the women across different companies or in terms of occupation even, right? So what they do is they also create alternate platform. Like this is one of the platform, as you can see, more than a magazine, a movement, right? And you'll find that all these stories are being done from the gender perspective. Okay, so from the feminist perspective, I should rather say that. So as you can see or read all these headlines, they have this very feminist angle to it. Okay. This is one of the story which I found so interesting about new aid creates permission structure for man to support Harris. So this platform is also looking into some of the advertisements being circulated in this context of US election. I just would like to play one in order to get, more sense about it, what they are talking about in this article, and what this kind of media is also talking about, right? So yeah, what do you think about this advertisement? What happens in the booth stays in the booth. Oh, you can't hear the advertisement? The audio wasn't clear? Okay, okay. Would you like to share anything about the advertisement? How do you see a feminine perspective into it, and how this media of advertisement is being used to represent that perspective, and how even that alternative platform is doing their stories on this kind of representation? I don't know how many of the mainstream line news channels are focusing on these kind of issues. But this is so interesting to see, right? And yeah, so the main point that I want to make is how media and technology is being used, right, in order to express their own ideology. Okay. Yeah. And then we have this theoretical perspective about symbolic interactionism, which we have talked a lot about it, right? And in each of those chapters that we discussed about the, about the gender and the race, right? So they have been talking about these theories. So how do you see symbolic interactionism in the use of media and technology? Let me just ask you people, yeah, I'll just give you the time to discuss about it. How do you see, uh, you know, how do you see the use of media and technology from the perspective of symbolic interactionism? Have you ever thought about that? Would you like to explain that a little bit to, to your friends here? What is your understanding about that? Anyone? So we are not only talking about the news media here, we are talking about the media objects. So for example, say, I think we discussed about that in the class little bit on how, your status is being defined by the kind of technology that you purchase, isn't it? So technology is a symbol that defines your status. It can be a social indicator of status and wealth. We discuss about that, right? More than that, that is about the use of technology. Now, how is that perspective being used by the media? Media use that to create two different types of group. One is they create a primary group where more the time you are online, more you get this sense that I am being surrounded by the people who are here in the online space. These are the only primary people that I need to follow. So that is, creating a primary group for an individual through media, through the use of media. And then they also create another group, which they call as reference group. So they would also look at, what different, technology or media is being used by the characters, or by the members of those primary groups. So how they or how these primary groups, members from the primary group in the online space influence your own behavior. Okay. So that kind of transform that primary group into a reference group. So you'd kind of go to a friend next to your room and you'd say him or her that, okay, this is what I have seen, this is the character in the music industry, playing this guitar. Okay, the company is this, the brand is this, that, or the singer is wearing this sneaker, this brand of sneaker, so I think we need to get that. So we kind of, refer them to people nearby. So from creating, a primary group to transforming them into a reference group is what the objective of, you know, symbolic interactionist perspective. Okay. Or if you look at it from the symbol perspective, this is how the media, the use of media and technology is creating, the meanings of all the symbols in your mind. So I think we would end here. So if you can see my slide again, I haven't shared it. Wait, let me do that. And then I'll finish the slide and we'll move ahead for the group project. Okay. So as you can see that I've put some points here, neo-Luddites versus technophiles, and middle ground symbolizing status. So neo-Luddites versus technophiles, these are some of the terms being used in the chapter, and you will get their meaning even if you just type it in the Google. But let me just explain you simply. Neo-Luddites is, it refers to a section of people who kind of oppose technology. Okay. So most of these older people, they fall into this section. Technophiles are who see a bright future in the use of technology. So there is this very conflict between these two sections of people, okay? And it will be very interesting to find these two sections of people across gender and racial lines. So even though, all these theoretical perspectives are being just described as it is, but you need to think about its application across gender and racial lines. Then only you can, get this meaning about, okay, how they mean or how they relate to this context. Okay. Do you have any question regarding that? No? Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me create a room and let me just put each of your groups into room, and then I will come to each of those groups. So till I come to your group, I expect that you discuss among your members about your preparation on the group project.